Hi, Pete. Let's talk about credit markets. There's been a lot of attention to them in recent years. There's a lot of debt that still needs to be refinancing. Some of it may have legacy aspects. How should people think about the credit market today and where rates are going, and then the credit market's response to that rate environment?
Yeah, I think the real question that investors need to consider today is not so much where rates are going in the short term, but where they go in the medium term. So whether it's higher or lower, I think the important point is really, is it for longer? So are rates going to stay elevated for longer? The cumulative impact of rate hikes that we've had to date is sufficient to put pressure on borrowers, on corporate and non-corporate balance sheets. And so that's really where our focus is as it stands today, is how long are those rates going to stay elevated, and that cumulative pressure that will be placed on borrowers' balance sheets. Now, that's as much a risk as an opportunity. The risk is obviously that borrowers face cash flow pressures, and those deals that were done in the heady days of 2021 come up for refinancing. But the opportunity is really all those loans that were written by banks that now fall into the universe of non-bank lenders, and there's going to be significant opportunity, I think, there for non-bank lenders to really reprice risk and access bank-like credit profiles that they weren't otherwise able to access in the days gone by.
Let's talk about some of the specific sectors. Merger and acquisition activity typically results in debt raisings. We've had relatively little of that. Do you think that's going to continue to be the case, or do you think it will be done with a new debt profile in mind?
Yeah, I think M&A activity has been challenged. I think, certainly we could see it improve from here, but I don't think it's a precondition for private lending activity to pick up. And it goes to the interest rate environment that we have before us and the amount of debt that needs to be refinanced. We've had such a huge amount of debt written during COVID, coming out of the COVID environment, that will need to be refinanced regardless of what M&A activity looks like, and I think a lot of that will go through the non-bank sector.
Let's turn to industry-specific sectors. Do you want to comment on which ones are showing up the most opportunity and which ones you're most cautious about?
Yeah, looking back 12 months ago, I think we had a lot of caution on the non-bank lending sector, so those businesses that fund themselves via securitization. We were heavily focused on the profitability of those businesses. They weren't generating positive cash flows and were exposed to increasing arrears coming out of the housing sector. What we found is that that's been quite resilient. Households of arrears have remained relatively low, although I would caution we're still quite early in that process. But that sector has been able to really recapitalise, repair balance sheets and come off what was a very low base. You can look at the share price of Zip Group as an example of someone who's been able to sort of navigate that path. I think where we do see the pressure is where those sectors that are most interest rate sensitive. And so commercial real estate lending is a part of the market where we see risk and opportunity. The risk is obviously those loans that were written in 2021. Interest coverage ratios are going to come under pressure because of the higher interest burden that those borrowers face. The office sector hasn't seen any meaningful increase in rents, and certainly there's been a great amount of dispersion across the office sector as to which buildings have been able to achieve positive rental inflation and which haven't. And so I think the risks are really around those buildings that haven't been able to, achieve high levels of occupancy and high levels of rental inflation.
Turning to an investor judging private credit opportunities more broadly, what are the kind of due diligence questions that you as an insider would encourage us to ask?
Yeah, we wrote a piece a while ago called 21 plus 5 questions you need to ask your private lending manager. So, hopefully people can go and read that. I'll give you the abbreviated version of my favourite 2 today. I think really number 1 is about conflicts, how they manage conflicts. You do see managers being on multiple parts of a transaction, so whether that's investing in the equity and the debt of a deal or investing in senior and junior debt of the same transaction in controlling positions, that creates risk. And certainly you want to be aware and alert to those situations. I think more broadly it's just a battle of transparency. So private markets are private. There isn't as much transparency of public markets, and so when asking questions of your manager, what you're really seeking to do is bridge that gap between transparency and lack thereof. And I think you can judge the quality of a manager by how transparent their responses to your due diligence questions are.
What do you see as the biggest potential issue in the next 12 to 18 months, aside from ones you've already mentioned?
Yeah, one thing we're watching closely is leverage and fund flows. So within private markets, the availability of capital has been increasing. So there's been a lot of capital flow into the space. And we're looking closely at fund flows to ensure, to make sure that that capital continues to flow into the space. I think if you get a withdrawal of capital, there will be those sectors that are more acutely impacted. Overall, at a macro level, higher interest rates and interest rates being higher for longer is certainly going to impact performance, but I don't think that that's going to cause systemic issues. I think systemic issues will be caused if you do see a withdrawal of capital combined with those managers using leverage being impacted by redemptions and having to be forced sellers or not able to refinance positions. That's what's really going to exacerbate issues. So that's what we're watching most closely.
Well, this is a sector that still will be front of mind for many investors, so thank you, Pete, for your comments.
Thanks, Giselle.